Our next speakers are two people I think do a very important job in our community, and it's Shanda Woodin and Tina Boncina. They're both therapists, and today they're going to talk about how logosynthesis can be applied in healing trauma. Now, we just come from a session where we're discussing how sometimes in adulthood we can deal with certain limitations or blockages, but sometimes because of things that happen in life, we carry a baggage. We come into adulthood with things that happened to us or that we lived through growing up, and these things can sometimes interrupt our energy or stop us or limit us. And I think the next session is important because both these speakers offer such great expertise and are able to hold space in such a compassionate and kind manner that people can go deep and heal what they need to heal. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Shanda Woodin and Tina Boncina. I give you the floor now.
Well, hi, hello to everybody. It's always nice to see you in such numbers. Some of you I know already, and some of you I'm looking forward to meeting in the upcoming months or years as it looks at the moment. So my name is Tina. I come from Slovenia and I'm a medical doctor by profession, but I work as a psychotherapist. I work with several different kinds of people. Lately, my main subject is burnout, but I have a lot of anxiety, depressions, and I work with children and adolescents as well. I was very glad that I was invited to speak about trauma because it's one of the most important subjects in my practice, and it's one of the most important subjects and issues that logosynthesis really helped me with. Um, I think that I was searching for something like this for a long time. I haven't even realized it. But during my work in a psychiatric hospital, I felt like my hands were tied all the time because I could explore the symptoms and I could relieve them to some point, make them, let's say, quieter, but not really going to the causes of the symptoms and making them go away and really healing the person. So when I met Willem on LinkedIn, the only good thing that happened on LinkedIn for me, by the way, was this. So he introduced me to logosynthesis and invited me to go to Brussels. And so my journey began. At first, I used the logosynthesis like a tool, like a method. My original approach is transactional analysis. So it was very compatible. But as I developed and as logosynthesis developed and as I grew as a person with it and by doing the work with all my colleagues, I could use it in a different manner, like a theory. And I use it with all my clients all the time. Okay, because why am I referring to this? Because I see the questions are, how do you introduce it and how do you approach people? When you have full confidence in what you're doing, you don't need to explain yourself very much. You just go and people will follow if your relationship is stable enough. So before I go into explaining what trauma is and how I work with it, I would like to give the word to Shanda and let her introduce herself as well.
Oh, thank you, Tina. So yeah, I'm Shanda Woodin. I'm from Brighton, Ontario in Canada. And I work in private practice, mostly with military members that are actively serving and also with veterans who've retired from the military. My passion is working with trauma and many of my clients have PTSD. Primarily I'm working with adults, although I do get referrals to see children. And in the past, primarily I saw children when I worked in private practice in the East Coast of Nova Scotia. What to say about, well, let me just ask you, Tina. You had talked a little bit about how trauma imprints in the brain, and I thought it might be poignant to explain this part in terms, because people are very curious about trauma and how do we use logosynthesis with trauma. So let me hand it over to you to say that part.
Thanks. So I will begin with the psychological point of view, only to guide you to the logosynthesis point of view, so that you can see the transition and compare two points of view. So in hope that you will get a better understanding of the trauma. So if we go the psychiatric or psychological way, trauma is a painful memory, something that happened to us and that we have, that has imprinted itself in our subconscious, and it's causing a lot of problems, symptoms in the here and now, in the present. So why does this happen? I will give you, let's say, a very simple example. For an instance, if you're driving in a car and you're relaxed and you're just doing your automatic thing and something happens, you get startled and you go off-road. In an instance, you see that something is wrong, and in an instance, you see that you will hit a tree. And in that millisecond before you hit the tree, you think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna be in the pool of blood hanging out of the car, and this will be the end of it. When I'm explaining it, it takes several seconds, but when you think about it, this image comes and it's really, really unpleasant. And then you hit the car into a tree, lose consciousness for a second or two, only to wake up and realize that everything is okay, that your airbag opened, that you can get out of the car, that already people are stopping and helping you, calling the police, calling the ambulance, stuff like that. So you were okay, yeah? You're frightened, perhaps your neck hurts, perhaps you have some minor contusions, but you survived. The car is wrecked, but that's okay. It's only a tin can, okay? And in a few weeks' time, things settle down, you get your insurance, you get your medical, you get some leave, and you want to return to your own normal life. But what happens? You don't want to drive. You don't want to get in the car. And if you do get into the car, you just stay on the old roads. You don't go on the highway, because what if you lose control? And this is the traumatic memory doing its thing, okay? In that emotional state where you went off the road and you were frightened for your life, the brain does not distinguish between real memories and the fantasies, okay? So they imprint like they are real, and you react to them. You react to them with fight or flight reaction, or even with the freezing reaction. So you just go cold. This is the medical point of view or the psychological point of view. In terms of logosynthesis, what happens is that in that instance, something is freezing, something becomes frozen, okay? And there's no flow of energy there, but something is blocking it from going around in your space, making you stopping you for using your full potential. So it's very unpleasant, and it takes a lot of your life energy that you could be using for your mission, instead of you are using just to get by, okay? So in each instance where you feel you will lose control, all the reaction comes. You don't think about what's causing it, but you certainly feel the symptoms. And this is when people usually come to see a therapist, a guide, a coach, a counselor, or somebody else from these counseling professions. Okay, so this is, let's say, an explanation what happens, how the memory imprints itself. But there are lots of triggers that can cause the same sensations to rise up again. And I will give it over to you, Shanda, because you know a lot about this.
Okay, thanks, Tina. Well, one of the things I really love about working with my clients using logosynthesis is well, military, they quite often want to protect their therapist and not tell all the gory details. So the nice thing that you can do with logosynthesis is you can explore with them what it is that's reactivated the trauma for them, so that you can get to a place of neutralizing it. And if you ask them certain questions, you can find out, is it an image that they see, or is it something they hear? Is it a smell or a taste? Maybe it's a vibration. So for instance, there are many times clients have said to me, I've had this thing happen to me at home where I fell on the ice. And when I landed on the ice, it felt so similarly to when I was overseas on my deployment, and we were in gunfire, and then there was an explosion and the shock wave happened, and I went flying through the air and landed on the ground. And that instant that I landed on the ground and there was this sensation of my body, it was the same as re-experiencing all over again what happened when I was on my deployment. So sometimes things can trigger them here in your everyday life, and it takes them back to what happened in their trauma reaction in the combat trauma. So even though we may work on certain pieces of the combat trauma, it may come up again and again. Same with fireworks, or if a stone hits the windshield. I've heard clients, it takes them to that gunfire sound, and their reaction is immediate. They can feel it in their body, and they can feel like they're there all over again, re-experiencing it. So working with logosynthesis, it's great because you can work on slice by slice by slice. And my clients actually have, well, I had a quite interesting opportunity when I worked on the military base. They, they approve certain modalities for you to use. And when my curriculum vitae, my resume went up to the headquarters in Ottawa to become a public servant, as opposed to a contract position, they noticed that I was using something called logosynthesis, and it was so new. It was so new, they hadn't heard of it, and so it wasn't approved. So I had been working with members who have PTSD using logosynthesis, but then when I found out, hey, you really can't be using this, it's not one of our approved methods, I reverted to using an old standby, which is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, have lots of advanced training in that. And quite interestingly, my clients, after a couple of sessions of using this modality, said, hey, I want to use those sentences again. And I'm like, oh, well, I can't use those just now because, it's not approved in the military yet. And they're like, well, I don't care. Let's use them anyway. So what's interesting is I asked them, can you please help me understand what it's like when we use the sentences? And they were able to share with me, they're so much more gentle on my system. And also when we're doing the eye movement, it's a stimulation with the EMDR, I just don't ever know where I'm going to go. I can kind of go all over the territory, all over the map, I heard them say. So one thing that's really great about logosynthesis is you can do very definitive small slices of the proverbial salami. You can just keep it very defined. So that's one of the things that I just love about working with clients with trauma, is that they notice how gentle it is on their system. They notice that they feel contained to be able to do a small piece of it and not just get blown up with all the different aspects of what could happen in their trauma experience. So yeah, that's one of the really lovely parts of it.
Yeah. Thanks. I imagine that the veterans really have a lot of traumatic memories that are sometimes hard to put into words. And with Logo, they don't need they don't need the words to explain, because they can close their eyes, explore the space, and just see the images or feel the reactions that they are so used to feeling. So that way we do prevent re-traumatization, which used to be quite a big problem for other approaches. People had to talk and talk about their experiences, and sometimes this was a trauma in itself. And here, this is the beauty of it. You don't need the concepts, you don't need to go overboard into too deep, let's say. You can stay lazy and stupid even with the hardest subjects in this world, okay? And that's why it's so good for children as well, because children cannot explain. Yeah, they don't have the apparatus, the cognitive capabilities to do it, but they speak in the language of logosynthesis practically from where they're born. They feel the essence very strongly, and you can guide them through all kinds of things, and they repeat the sentences with no problem, even if they don't understand the words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share one of my examples, because I see people are talking about you, Shanda, you worked with salami, people worked with onions. So it's the layering, okay? That's the beauty of it. The elegance of this approach is that you don't need to do it all at once. You can go step by step and really respect the process of the client. They will do as much as they're ready to do. You don't have to push it, and you can have full confidence that you will get to the relief at the end. So just for example, working with a different kind of trauma, let's say a client came to my practice and she was afraid of cats. Because each time she would visit her friend, the friend's cat would come up to her legs and gently slide between them, brushing herself against the legs. And my client, she would get the shivers. It was really unpleasant for her. And she didn't know what to do because she couldn't see the friend anymore because of the cat. So she expressed this in session, and we started peeling the layers or cutting the salami. And what came up was that the touch of the cat was so gentle and it was unpleasant for her. And this makes not much sense, because otherwise when something fluffy and warm cuddles up to you, you feel nice. So I invited her to explore her space, and she said, I feel the shivers down my spine as if this touch is not appropriate. And just by letting her sit with that, it came up that it's like her grandpa was touching her. She did not go into details because she didn't need to, but it was actually the appropriate touching of the sexual abuse that she had unfortunate to live through with her grandpa. She did not explain much, but there was a great release. She completely forgot that. It was completely suppressed and it did not come up until then. But I just wanted to share this with you because it is an, let's say, an odd case. She came because of the cats, and at the end it came up that it was something completely on the other side of the spectrum. So there you go. Lots of interesting things happen when you do this kind of work. And
surprising results can happen, and surprising issues can come through, not just for you as the therapist, but also for the client too. I recall one client came in, she worked on the military Air Force base near where I live, and she was needing to go out and work on heavy equipment on the airfield. But every time she was asked to go out and work on the equipment, she would get extremely anxious. And so she came in, but she wasn't quite sure why she was so anxious. But eventually in exploring, she realized, oh my gosh, I've had these 2 car accidents. And that's why every time I think about going on the equipment, I get so crazy nervous. So we worked on, the sounds, the sights, all kinds of different aspects, sensory aspects of the car accidents. And then she was completely able to go out onto the airfield and work on the heavy equipment, machinery. And the other interesting thing with this particular client is she said, Shanda, so much has changed since we've only had just a few sessions in doing this work. She said, but I am so shy all the time. And we ended up going back to a very early memory from childhood in elementary school, where she walked into the classroom and all the children were laughing at her, or she so perceived the children were laughing at her. And we worked on the sound of the laughter of all the children. And then suddenly the next session she comes in, she's like, you won't believe it, but I'm talking to all kinds of people, not only in my squadron, but in other units of other squadrons. And normally I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was just so reserved and quiet. So it can really transform some people's lives. And you never know what is going to meet you in the session. And that's what I love about it as a therapist, is there's no long case conceptualizations needed or preparing before a client comes in. You don't have to agonize over interpreting or analyzing the information, because the client knows what all of that information means to them. And for us as a clinician, we know it's just frozen energy that's holding them back in their life. And once you can neutralize the frozen structures that are holding them back and limiting them, then they're free to just live their life in the way that they wish they could. So that's the part I love as a clinician, is you don't have to do so much interpretations and psychoanalysis. And it's hard because we learned all of that for years. And then suddenly in logosynthesis, we're like, oh, we don't need all of that.
Yeah, and it saves you your energy. Plus, the beauty of it is because you don't have to work so hard, but you can stay with the client and his process or her process. When the energy gets into flow, you feel the flow as well. Right. And as you have remarked when we were talking before this session, before this presentation, the beauty of it is that even after all these hard, let's say, issues, tough subjects that come up that were really damaging and tough to live through, at the end, when these frozen structures dissolve and the client gets into contact with essence, at the end of the workday, you are energized. Okay.
Yes, you have lots of energy to do your own thing. And yes.
I think this is a very important aspect to point out, that you're not exhausted, and there's not a lot of counter transference, so you don't take a lot of things home, because you can get into flow as well. And I feel for the most part just grateful that I could be present with such deep process. And that's something I rarely lived through when I was doing TA only.
Yeah, it's true, because in the evening, I still have lots of energy to do the things that I want to do, as opposed to using other modalities, and you can become vicariously traumatized. And my military clients are always so worried about giving me all the gruesome, gory details. And I'm like, you don't have to worry, because it's just frozen energy, and energy either belongs to you or it does not belong to you. So when we do the work, it doesn't come into my system. It just goes to where it belongs. So I love that part. There's no burnout. There's no worry about, how that's going to affect me. And then they can be more at ease to share their story, because a lot can happen in sharing your story. So, and also what in also speaking about that, the gory details, one of the things you can have happen with your clients is they don't have to give you so many details in order to get to the place of neutralizing what's disconcerting or distressing to them. They can, you can use certain words that kind of capture what is going on for them. And you can use metaphors. I had one client come in, and she had an early sexual abuse trauma, and she was so activated and distressed by the trauma, and she had no words to describe it. And the lovely thing is, she used the word lightning. It's like a lightning. And so we just use that in the sentences, the metaphor of lightning, and it represented so much for her. And then she was able to talk about it. Sometimes you're just so frozen in the trauma that you can't even express at all. And it could have come from a time where she was pre-verbal in her language development.
You just answered the question that came up in the chat, that whether you
I
can,
haven't been reading the chat.
whether you can work with the client if they're in fight or flight response, and you can. Okay, this is the best way, because first they just retrieve, they get just enough energy in order to explore their space, and this is one of the greatest advantages of logosynthesis by far, I think.
Yes, yeah, it's lovely that way.
Yeah. Okay, I see we have almost come to the end of our time.
Should we answer any questions, or I haven't been paying attention to the chat. Sorry, guys.
No problem. That's why there's two of us. Okay. Yeah.
So I've been monitoring the chat a bit, and Jeanette was asking, does logosynthesis work if the client's in fight mode during the session? I think we've talked quite a bit about it, and but maybe if you want to say something else about that.
No, it's just what Shanda was saying just now about using the metaphors and just cutting off the first slice of salami or the cucumber for the vegans.
And you can use all kinds of things. You can use colors, shapes, sizes. If they don't have the words to describe it, maybe there's a shape or a color or some kind of a metaphor that has meaning to them that you can use in the sentences as well. There's so many ways you can go about this. It's exciting.
And I see that Johan just remarked that that it is safe to use logosynthesis. It is very safe, because the client will just go to where he or she is capable at that moment, and not a little bit further. So you cannot re-traumatize. Even if you go if you take the smallest steps, it's okay. Even the smallest steps will guide you to the goal. So no problem there.
Yes. And with complex trauma, it's important to do really small steps. And you don't know, you may do a big piece and not be aware of it. It takes time for military clients who've had a complex trauma to integrate and assimilate what they've just neutralized. And sometimes you work on little pieces, and sometimes you work on bigger pieces. But I find it's always best to go for the smaller slices. It's easier to integrate and assimilate that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
someone was asking. Oh, go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, someone was asking, is there a specific seminar? Yes, there is. The Path
of Courage. Actually, I'm teaching the Path of Courage online in English. It's coming up this month, and you can just go on my website, or you can go on the LIA website, the international website, to find the links to do that. But I can type in, as we're talking, how to access and to register for that course if you're interested in trauma work.
Okay, and then the question was, what about pre-verbal unconscious abusive trauma? That's the thing with Logo. You work with images or with bodily sensations, so there's no need for words. The words that you need in Logo are the sentences that move the energy, and that's it. So there is a special seminar as well about the perinatal matrices that also goes way back. And it's about the imagery, about the guided imagery that then helps you to search for the trauma that was present before you could, even while you were in the belly, or even preconception. So these are the advanced seminars. And yeah, so there you have it. The cat example, how many iterations and what was the process involved getting her to recover. Well, it was only 1 hour, 1 session cure, because she came because the goal was, the contract was to get rid of the fear of cats. And once the bodily sensation of the cat went away, she was okay with cat being there, and because we cleared the memories regarding her grandpa, it all went away in a session, because she had no other problems because of the abuse, and there was nothing else there was no need to do any other work. So I just stayed with the client. She did not present this any further. So there you go. Yeah.
So we're getting the thumbs up here that our time is up. There is so much to talk about in terms of trauma, and I think we've just very much skimmed the surface here today. It's exciting to talk about it, and I love to teach it as well. As we had mentioned, there's the Path of Courage, which is all about fear and trauma, and there's other path seminars that you can access. Anyway, it was really lovely to converse with you today, Tina.
Yeah,
about something that we're both so passionate about.
Yeah. We are. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you both. And for everyone here, please be reminded that we will also have an open question and answer session in a couple of hours, so we can continue asking questions about this if you're interested.
Great.
Right.
Thanks,
So
Alan.
Thank you both.